Hi everyone, it's Evan. Welcome to Chapter 3 in our Early Childhood Environments course. And Chapter 4, I want to give you some tips of things that I want you to highlight as well as in addition to what you have already highlighted. Thank you for all your great discussions. So we're talking about a context for learning. So that is, how do we set things up in such a way that children and students can learn? And what are those elements of that? So we are going to talk about some schedules, how to transition, groupings, and assessments. So I'm starting on page 49 if you like to follow along. And we're talking about how to structure time and the importance of that. So what do you think about that? Why do we have schedules? What did you think was the reason for it? And when do you have a schedule in your life? What's the purpose of that schedule? So as our textbook starts off with, it's very heavily researched, supported by research, and talking about the importance of why we need schedules. So for children in developing their executive function, they are promoting the idea that with planning and with knowing what's coming up, that children start to learn how to regulate themselves. So they say daily schedules are necessary to provide consistency and psychological stability and to allow children to know what is expected. So the same thing, that consistency and that executive function from planning. And so they point out here the importance of basing this on the philosophies that we understand in the research. So let's talk about some of these tips for planning schedules. Our book shows some of it starts off with philosophies and talks about Bredecamp's philosophy on page 50. And if you've already taken EARC 109, you know that she is very seminal in the research there. And in fact, we use her textbook for that class. So page 51 talks about respecting children's needs, their attention span. So setting up schedules, we need to understand that an infant room, a toddler room, a preschool room, an elementary room, secondary, college, all those schedules are going to look different based on individual needs, and we need to respect that. So part of doing a schedule is posting it for the children to see as well as the families, so families can support the activities that are going on. And we really emphasize here child-initiated activities, meaning that they're allowed to make choices from many different activities. We also have in our schedule adult-initiated activities because that's how we scaffold. We know where children need to be going and how they need to progress. So we're very, very supportive of that kind of a schedule too. Page 52, 53 talks about all the elements of setting up that schedule, having quiet activities, when to have active activities. What about allowing time for routines such as resting and mealtime, toothbrushing, all those things that you're planning. Then on page 53 it talks about planning transitions, and we'll go later on talk about some of those tips as well. So, and then they really emphasize having some time to be outdoors. Well, in our program here at the college, we actually promote not just some time outdoors, but we actually challenge our teachers to think about setting up a whole day outside, doing your whole routine outside. It can be done. All right, and then here's something very important. Include extended center time for engaging in-depth learning. And that's what we talked about today, about the barrier of ringing a bell or a limiting time at a center. We really believe that the child needs to spend a lot of time in that activity. And when we see children flitting from activity to activity, we actually encourage them through discussion and through challenging questions to stay longer in building blocks. When they're building blocks and they get frustrated and then they go off and paint and then they don't finish there and they don't clean up there and they go to the housekeeping or they go to the puzzles, we really try to encourage them to spend a longer amount of time there. And I want you to think about why that's important. Why do they need to spend that time there instead of flitting? Think about what's causing ADD in children these days. Amount of flitting. What are they doing in their lives to go from one activity to another, jumping from this to that? So page 54 and 55 talks about the large group time, and we also need small group time. Why are they important? What's important about each one? And our book goes on about the importance of group size and the research that supports that. So make sure you take a look at that. There, it talks on 55 about making the schedule visible, meeting the needs of families. So we want to make sure that we are encouraging them to see what we're doing so they can talk with their children before they bring them to class. They can prepare them, saying in the car, "Oh, so what are you going to do today? What are you going to do in work time?" And have them already be thinking about what they're going to be doing and how they're going to use the time that day. So here's some sample daily schedules, page up through 57, 58, 59, depending on the different age levels. And then here are some great activities for transitions, how to make a smooth transition. And you all have seen children, some who don't transition well. And one of my own children, we used to almost have to prepare him the day ahead of time. Now tomorrow, remember, is grocery shopping day. He hated transitioning. Once he got involved in something, he hated to go and change, put his shoes on or stop what he's doing to go to the next thing. So he needed to be transitioned ahead of time. On page 62, there are some great hints there. When you're transitioning from a home to a program, it's really difficult for some children. So, like I was saying about my son, though they like going to that next thing, in fact, once they get there, they don't want to go home. So we need to be very tender with these children and very careful and help them establish in them some skills for transitioning. Ask them how they can transition better. Say to them the night before, so now you remember, Johnny, that you really have a hard time leaving home and going to school, but once you get there, you like it. So be prepared. What are you going to do so that it's not such a rough time tomorrow? And enlist the child's help in solving that problem and coming up with a solution. On page 63, transitioning from indoors to outdoors. Well, that's just a logistics issue sometimes, especially in weather, or if the children have been inside and they don't have their shoes on and it's time to go outside. And some children require adult help in putting shoes on and tying shoes, and some don't. Some weather requires rain pants that zip, some that button, so everybody's going to be ready to go outside at different times. So have some strategies for your program where children can go out when they're ready. Maybe there's an adult that's in, an adult that's out, or you leave the door open so that you can see both people, the ones inside still getting ready and the ones that are ready to go outside. So make sure that you're planning for these kinds of transitions as well. Nap time. I and many researchers do not support programs that force children to lay down for long periods of time if they're not sleeping. If after half an hour kids are not sleeping, you need to provide an alternative, because that's just not nice. So have a quiet center for reading or a quiet puzzle so that those who are sleeping can sleep and those who aren't don't have to lie there anymore, or let them do something quiet there and read a book or string some beads or something that honors who they are and does not make them feel shameful or feel like they're a bad kid for not sleeping. Some things that you can do to help children sleep are some guided imagery, some deep breathing. Even when I taught kindergarten, we always had just a few minutes of rest time during the day, and I'd put on some quiet music and I'd rub backs, and no one was made to feel shameful for not sleeping. It should not be a punishment. Oh my gosh, look at all of us now who love sleeping and love naps. Should not be a punishment if you don't. Okay, page 64 has some cleanup tips. Oh my. If you ever want to see this well done, come to our lab school. This is a hard thing for kids to do. Transitioning to go home. Again, that's hard. Group size, page 65. There's a lot of scientific research that when you get, doesn't matter how many adults you have one-to-one with a child, if your group sizes are too large, then it impacts all the children. Think about yourself at a restaurant. The more people that come in, the noisier it gets, the more your energy rises, and for some people that could be stressful too. Well, it's the same with children. Their group sizes, no matter how many adults they have with each child, it's it's too stressful when the group sizes are too big. And we need small group sizes too. Adults need it. When you're in a conference and you're asked to think about something or answer a question in a large group, only one or two get to be heard or only one or two get to speak. But when you're putting people into groups of three or four, more people get to speak and to be heard and to say voice their opinion. Our textbook then goes into looping, which is a fascinating idea. I've not ever seen it done around here. It might have been, but I have seen it done in California where the teacher goes from first to second with the same group of kids, and then the next year goes back down to first. So those students have that same teacher, and they can even have that same group of kids for a couple of years. And the book talks about some of the benefits of that. Then we get into assessing. Part of our day in planning our curriculum is not just the materials or the child's interest, but what's next for that child. What is that child ready to learn next? And we do that through assessing. We look at what the child is doing, we look at what they've learned, what they haven't learned yet, and we make our plans around that, saying, okay, they're ready for this. So page 67 has some wonderful ideas of things that you'll be learning about as you take more classes in our program. How to take an anecdotal record. That is where you go and you watch a child and you sit there and you say, Johnny put 3 blocks on top of 3 blocks and said, look, I built a tower. So that's how you write that down in an anecdotal record, so that it gives you data for when later you go to fill out an assessment on adding or a child talking about attributes, how high something is or how big. So you want that data in building your story about the child when you're presenting data to your parents, your families, or to your school board. So that's what an anecdotal record is. And it goes on and on about some work samples and things like that on 67. Take a look at that. On 68 and 9 talks about how to organize information. We can do webbing or a KWHL chart. We were talking about that in our discussion, the KWHL. What do you want to know? What do you already know? What would you like to learn? How will you go about finding this information? And then in the end, when you're all done, talk about what you learned, the L part of the KWHL chart. Very, very useful for organizing our schema, the way we think, the way we imagine our brain as a coat rack with hooks, and we hang up knowledge on different hooks depending on how we've organized it. A Venn diagram is another way to do that too. Then in chapter 4, I want you to take some time to understand what a healthy and safe environment is. It isn't just about our nutrition or just about not running on wet cement, or it's about all kinds of things. Let's talk about this. We go through on 74 some hand washing techniques, how to reduce illnesses in a classroom. Many of us have systems for this. What about pesticides? What kind of role are you going to take in that in your own program? What kind of food are you going to serve? With all the information that comes out about should we wash or should we peel, or are the pesticides truly dangerous, we need to be kept up to date on that. So page 77 has a really good chart of things that are that produce highest in pesticides and lowest. And there, if you have an iPhone or an iPad or go on the internet, you can look up some apps or some research for which of these vegetables and fruits can be added to this list here. So page 78 and 79 talks a lot about the standards and safety and electrical outlets and all these things. When you're establishing a center or working on one or evaluating one, you need to keep these things in mind and have safety checklists. There's a great tip on page 81. If space in the bathroom is an issue in a home childcare, a removable diaper changing table that is placed above the tub can be a solution. So we have to keep in mind that some of you are establishing your own homes or your home businesses, or you're going to be working in a bigger center. And so there's some pictures there and some great tips for you for that. And then sleeping, we now have proof that babies should be sleeping on their backs and somewhat at an incline too. because of the deaths for when they sleep on their stomachs are higher. And we've had that research for many years. When I lived in Japan as a little child, everybody was placed on their back for sleeping. It wasn't until I came to America that I saw another way of doing it. So, all right, that was chapter 3 and 4, and I wanted to thank you all for your great discussions, and this is the feedback I wanted to give you today, and I've left you some in the Grade Center as well. Have a great day. Bye.